Picture this. You turn on your computer, open Notepad to jot down a quick thought, and a giant colorful AI button is staring you in the face. You open your Start menu, and there are ads. You try to set up your own PC without a Microsoft account, and the setup screen will not let you proceed. You try to switch your default browser to Chrome, and Microsoft Edge starts flashing warnings like you're committing a crime. You open File Explorer, and it crashes. Then a forced update installs itself without asking, makes the performance worse, and requires a restart at the worst possible moment. You did not ask for any of this. You paid for this computer. This is your machine. And yet every single day, Microsoft is making decisions about how you use it, without your permission, without your input, and without any sign that it is going to stop. Meanwhile, across the internet, millions of people are quietly discovering something that the tech world has been calling a joke for 20 years. Linux works. It works beautifully. It works without ads, without forced AI, without dark patterns, and without the creeping feeling that your operating system is working against you. And in 2026, the war between Microsoft and Linux has escalated to a level that nobody saw coming, because now entire governments are switching sides. To understand how bad things have gotten for Microsoft, you need to understand what the company did to Windows 11 over the past 2 years, and how its own users eventually turned on it so hard that they invented a word specifically to describe their disgust. That word is Microslop. It combines Microsoft with slop, the internet term for low-quality AI-generated content that floods everywhere without adding value. Users coined Microslop to describe exactly what Microsoft had been doing to Windows, stuffing Copilot, its AI assistant, into every corner of the operating system, whether it belonged there or not. Copilot appeared in Notepad, a text editor, so simple it has not changed meaningfully in decades. It appeared in the snipping tool, a basic screenshot utility. It appeared in Photos, in the taskbar, in the Start menu, in File Explorer, in Paint, in Widgets, in the setup screen, in the browser, and on a dedicated keyboard key that nobody asked for and that most people repurposed for something else the moment they discovered it could be remapped. Microsoft did not add these things because users wanted them. Microsoft added them because the company had decided that AI was the future and that the way to make Windows feel modern was to plaster the Copilot brand on everything in sight. It was one of the biggest miscalculations in the company's recent history. And the blowback has been severe. Throughout 2025, Windows 11 was plagued by severe bugs. From security updates that made business PCs unable to boot, to sluggish File Explorer performance and broken dark mode elements, the operating system was falling apart. The first Windows 11 update of 2026 had its own problems, forcing emergency out-of-band patches to fix shutdown issues and crashes in cloud. Applications like OneDrive and Dropbox. A second emergency update was needed just days later to fix even more issues on top of that. Microsoft also confirmed BSOD and boot failures after the January security update, with recovery options still uncertain for some affected systems. Legacy modem drivers were unexpectedly removed by a security update, disabling older hardware that users depended on. Windows Latest compiled a list of 20 major Windows 11 update issues in 2025, but there were many more. What made all of this so damaging was not just the bugs themselves, it was the timing. Microsoft was simultaneously pushing harder than ever on Copilot integration, while the core operating system was falling apart underneath it. Users who just wanted a stable, fast, reliable PC were instead getting AI buttons in Notepad and BSODs after security patches. The combination was toxic. Microsoft forced this massive AI integration just as Windows was suffering through one of its worst development years in recent memory. And the damage to user trust was not abstract. It was measurable and visible. Reddit communities dedicated to Windows filled up with posts from users describing the moment they had finally had enough. Windows Central comment sections lit up with complaints about File Explorer instability, unfinished interface transitions, and bugs that had persisted across multiple update cycles without being addressed. As one Reddit user put it, nobody asked or wants it, just make the OS work properly. That single sentence summarized the entire Windows 11 crisis better than any analyst report could. Users were not hostile to AI in principle. They were furious that Microsoft had prioritized AI theater over basic functionality, and that the operating system they depended on for work, creativity, and daily life had become demonstrably less reliable as a direct result of that prioritization. Satya Nadella dropped a bombshell on Microsoft's late April 2026 investor call. The CEO admitted the company is doing foundational work to win back fans across Windows, Xbox, Bing, and Edge. That admission, from the CEO of one of the most valuable companies in the world on an investor call, confirmed what millions of users had already concluded on their own. Microsoft had gone off track. The company even used those exact words internally. Windows led. Pavan de Voulery acknowledged the pain points users experienced, admitting the OS went off track with aggressive AI expansion while basic stability issues persisted. On March 20th, 2026, de Voulery published a landmark blog post outlining Microsoft's renewed commitment to Windows quality, promising fewer disruptions and a deliberate pullback on AI integration. The company started removing Copilot buttons from Snipping Tool, Photos, and Notepad. The colorful Copilot logo that had been stamped into the top corner of Notepad was stripped away. Microsoft promised to limit updates requiring a reboot to monthly only and return to allowing users to postpone them. It was, in the eyes of many observers, a public surrender, a company that had overplayed its hand so badly that it had to apologize to its own users and promise to undo what it had done to their computers. But here's where the story gets far bigger than just Microsoft's internal problems. Because while Microsoft was busy cramming AI into Notepad and watching its reputation collapse, something extraordinary was happening on the other side of the world. Governments, actual sovereign governments, were making the decision to abandon Windows entirely and move their entire national computing infrastructure to Linux. Not one government, not a small municipality, France, the fifth largest economy in the world. In April 2026, the French Minister of Public Accounts, Daniel Amiel, announced the country's plan to move all government computers, the computers of 2.5 million civil servants, from Microsoft to Linux, 2.5 million machines. That is not a pilot program. That is not an experiment. That is a national decision, backed by ministerial authority, that Windows is no longer the right choice for France's digital future. In a translated statement, French Minister David Amiel called the move to Linux part of an attempt by the nation to regain control of our digital destiny. Every government ministry in France is required to put its migration plan in place by the autumn of 2026. The Linux distribution most likely to be adopted is Genbuntu, a customized version of Ubuntu that has already been running on over 100,000 police computers since 2008, making it one of the most proven large-scale Linux deployments in the world. France is not alone, not even close. Among those countries that have already started to implement first steps to become digitally sovereign are Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Austria. Germany's most northern state, Schleswig-Holstein, became the first region in Europe to completely replace Microsoft tools with Linux and LibreOffice in public offices. The German Federal Ministry for Digital Transformation released a framework in spring 2026, stating that in future, only open formats, such as open document format, will be permitted for official documents, effectively replacing Microsoft Word as the standard for government administration. This is part of Germany's broader Deutschland Stack strategy, which aims to increase the use of open source software and store government data within national or European infrastructure rather than on American corporate servers. In early 2026, the City of Amsterdam published a multi-year digital autonomy strategy covering 2026 to 2035, outlining the city's plan to achieve full digital sovereignty by the end of that period. Denmark's Ministry of Digital Affairs announced its own transition away from Microsoft toward open source platforms. The pattern is unmistakable. Across Europe, country after country is reaching the same conclusion at roughly the same time. Depending on a single American technology company for critical national computing infrastructure is a strategic vulnerability, and Linux is the solution. The driving force behind these decisions is a concept called digital sovereignty, the idea that a country should control its own digital infrastructure rather than being dependent on foreign corporations. The government's goal is to reduce reliance on U.S. tech companies and to gain control over critical digital infrastructure, choosing from a long list of European alternatives. This is not an anti-American sentiment in isolation. It is a rational, strategic calculation that any nation would make when assessing its vulnerabilities. If your entire government runs on Windows, Microsoft can change the pricing of its licenses, change the terms of its cloud services, introduce features you did not ask for and cannot remove, or simply discontinue support for the version you depend on. And there is nothing you can do about it, except pay whatever they charge. Linux eliminates that dependency entirely. The source code is open. No single company controls it. No single vendor can hold you hostage. And for a government responsible for the security and continuity of national services, that freedom has a value that is impossible to put a number on. The cybersecurity dimension of this shift is equally significant. In 2026, as cyber warfare and digital espionage become more sophisticated, many governments see Linux as a safer and more reliable option. Windows, as the dominant operating system for decades, has historically been the primary target for malware, ransomware, and state-sponsored hacking operations. Its ubiquity is both its strength and its greatest weakness from a security perspective. Linux, by security model, more transparent, more configurable, and with a much smaller attack surface for most government use cases, When France's National Gendarmerie switched to Ubuntu in 2008, the decision was driven in part by security considerations, and nearly 2 decades later that system has proven itself stable, secure, and economically superior to the Windows alternative. Meanwhile, back on the consumer side, the exodus from Windows to Linux is also accelerating, and for reasons that have nothing to do with geopolitics. Linux gaming hit 5.33% on Steam in March 2026, as Steam Deck, Proton compatibility, and the end of Windows 10 support drove new users to the platform. 5.5% of Steam users running Linux might sound modest in isolation. But consider that for most of PC gaming history, Linux gaming was essentially zero. The progression from irrelevant to a measurable slice of the entire Steam user base represents a fundamental shift in what Linux is capable of delivering for everyday users. Valve's Proton compatibility layer, which allows Windows games to run on Linux without modification, has transformed the gaming landscape on Linux to a degree that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. Thousands of games that were previously Windows exclusive now run on Linux, many of them with identical or near identical performance. Earlier this year, the distaste Windows users had for Microsoft's endless AI tools finally bubbled over. They coined the term Microslop, combining Microsoft with the word referring to low-quality AI content. The intent was clear. People were sick and tired of Microsoft trying to squeeze AI tools into everything they use. And the comparisons that switchers make between Windows and Linux are consistently striking. Linux is a different beast. There are no ads in the start menu. Nobody is trying to convince you to spend money on anything, and the operating system respects which apps you want without trying to influence your decision. That description, an operating system that respects what you want, should be a baseline expectation for any piece of software. The fact that it now reads like a luxury feature is a measure of how far Microsoft has drifted from basic user-first design principles. While Windows now feels like a product, Linux still feels like an operating system, something you can add to, tweak, and remove from at your own leisure. One of the most damaging specific episodes in Microsoft's recent history illustrates exactly what kind of company it has become when it comes to user trust. Windows Recall was introduced as a flagship AI feature, a tool that would continuously screenshot everything happening on your screen, index it, and allow you to search your computing history using natural language. The concept was presented as revolutionary productivity technology. The reality, when security researchers examined it, was a privacy nightmare. For everyday users, the notion that Windows 11 would quietly log and index their on-screen activity felt deeply uncomfortable. The backlash was swift. Concerns about surveillance, data retention, and potential misuse overshadowed any supposed gains in productivity. The feature was storing unencrypted images of everything you had ever viewed on your PC, including passwords, banking information, private messages, and confidential documents. Microsoft was forced to pause the broad rollout and completely redesign the feature's approach to privacy and data storage. The entire episode became a clear warning sign inside the company. Not every capability that AI makes possible will be accepted, especially when it touches something as sensitive as personal history. For many users, Recall was the moment they decided they were done with Windows. Not angry, not complaining on Reddit, but genuinely done. Early Windows 11. Copilot builds confidently fabricated system settings, recommended non-existent PowerShell commands, and misinterpreted basic support queries. For a tool that Microsoft positions as a trusted companion, such blunders are toxic. The accuracy problem ran alongside the privacy problem and the stability problem, creating a triple threat to Microsoft's reputation that no single apology blog post could fully address. Worse, Microsoft's remedy was often more Copilot. When users complained about a bad AI suggestion, the fix was to interact further to refine the model, not to offer an off switch. This approach, where the solution to a forced feature users did not want is more of that forced feature, captures the fundamental disconnect between Microsoft's corporate strategy and its actual users' needs better than anything else. Microsoft's response to all of this has been a combination of genuine course correction and carefully managed PR. The company has started pulling Copilot buttons out of core applications. It has promised to make updates less disruptive. It is committed to improving File Explorer performance and fixing the memory footprint issues that made Windows 11 feel heavier than Windows 10 on identical hardware. Microsoft is finally phasing out Copilot in Windows 11. Following massive user backlash, the company is stripping the AI while fixing the OS, but the community reaction to these promises has been skeptical rather than grateful, and that skepticism is entirely warranted. Reddit users repeatedly describe the shift as PR speak, arguing Copilot and Recall are here to stay, just repackaged. The trust deficit that Microsoft has accumulated over years of dark patterns, broken updates, forced integrations, and privacy scandals cannot be repaired by a single blog post and a few remove buttons. Years of dark patterns have trained users to be suspicious. Every new Windows feature is met with, "What's the catch?" The structural problem facing Microsoft is deeper than any single product decision can fix. Microsoft's core operating system ecosystem is fundamentally struggling in its quest to maintain the hearts and minds of the next generation of developers. The core issue is not a lack of capital. It is a profound structural deficit of user trust and platform freedom. Developers, who represent both a disproportionately influential segment of THE user base and the people who build the applications everyone else depends on, have been moving to Linux and macOS for years. The server world is already overwhelmingly Linux. Cloud infrastructure runs on Linux. Android, the most widely used operating system on Earth by active device count, is built on a Linux kernel. The web runs on Linux. The shift happening now in consumer desktops and government workstations is the last frontier of a transformation that has already been happening everywhere else in computing for over a decade. What makes 2026 specifically significant is the convergence of multiple forces that have all reached critical mass simultaneously. Windows 10 support ends in October 2025, and rather than upgrade to a Windows 11 they distrust, millions of users on hardware that cannot run Windows 11 are exploring alternatives. Linux gaming through Proton and Steam Deck has reached a quality threshold where it is genuinely viable for mainstream players. European governments have coordinated around digital sovereignty as a policy priority and are executing real migrations at national scale. And Microsoft's own behavior, the Copilot overreach, the recall privacy disaster, the persistent bugs, the ads and start menus, the forced Microsoft accounts, the aggressive Edge behavior has eroded goodwill to a level that even record revenues cannot mask. While Windows 11 was bleeding reputation throughout 2025, Apple launched the MacBook Neo. Priced at a highly aggressive $599, the fanless A18 Pro-powered laptop fundamentally disrupted the entry-level PC market. Millions of users who were holding on to aging Windows 10 machines, refusing to upgrade to Windows 11 due to its reputation for Copilot bloat, ads, and bugs, jumped ship to macOS. Apple forced Microsoft's hand not through superior marketing, but through superior product execution at a price point that Windows hardware used to own. The combination of macOS gaining users at the premium end and Linux gaining users at the technically minded and government end is squeezing Windows from two directions simultaneously. Where does this leave you as an individual watching this war unfold? The honest answer is that you have more genuine choices than at any point in the history of personal computing. Linux in 2026 is not the Linux of 2005, where installing a graphics driver required reading academic papers. Major distributions like Ubuntu, Linux Mint, and Fedora install in under 30 minutes with a graphical installer that walks you through every step. Hardware compatibility has never been better. The application ecosystem, bolstered by web-based tools that work in any browser on any operating system, covers the vast majority of what everyday users need. Gaming on Linux, while not yet matching Windows for absolute compatibility, covers thousands of titles and is improving with every Proton release. The barrier to trying Linux has never been lower, and the motivation, escaping an operating system that sometimes feels designed to work against you, has never been higher. The war between Microsoft and Linux is no longer a niche debate between developers and system administrators. It is a mainstream political, economic, and personal computee, a story unfolding across Europe, across gaming communities, across corporate IT departments, and across the bedrooms of millions of frustrated Windows users who simply want a computer that behaves like a tool rather than a subscription service. Microsoft knows the ground is shifting. The apologies and the Copilot removals and the promises of stability are proof that the company is aware of what it stands to lose. But awareness is not the same as action, and action is not the same as sustained change. The question of whether Microsoft can rebuild the trust it has spent years destroying is one that 2026 will begin to answer, and the governments of France, Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands are not waiting to find out.